Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Family. I'm your co-host AJ, and I'm here with my sister Katie and co-host as well. It's just the two of us again today. Stephanie was unable to join us, so it will just be Katie and I discussing this week's case. So this week on the show, we are going to be discussing the Sherri Papini case. And Katie just told me before we started recording that you aren't really familiar with this case at all. You don't really know too much of the details or any of the details, which actually kind of, like I said, it kind of bodes well because it's actually might be super interesting for you to hear it kind of for the first time as the story develops and like all the twists and stuff that come along with it. So this is unlike any other case that we've really covered on the show so far. And if you are familiar with it, you definitely know why. But if you're not so familiar with it, then you're in for like a really unique true crime case that leaves many people ultimately angry, confused, and it's just a very weird one. So we're just going to dive right in. So Sherri Papini and her husband Keith, so they originally met in high school and then they reconnected in 2006. And eventually the couple got married in 2009. And by all appearances, they had a happy, loving marriage. Keith worked as an audiovisual technician at Best Buy, and Sherri worked as an account executive for AT&T. At one point, she eventually got laid off from this job and then became a full-time stay-at-home mom. So Keith and Sherri were kind of like the all-American couple, but 7 years after tying the knot, their happy life is uprooted when Sherri suddenly disappears. So November 2nd of 2016 is when things kick off in this story. And Sherri's husband Keith says that around 6:50 a.m. on November 2nd, he leaves his house after kissing Sherri goodbye on his way to work. And he says that he leaves the house. Sherri texts him at around 10:47 a.m. that morning, asking if he was going to be coming home for lunch. And then she leaves the house at around 11 a.m. to go for a jog. And she's actually last seen around this time by neighbors who see her jogging down the street. So upon Keith's return later that day, he finds that Sherri is not at home and that she had not picked up their children from daycare. So he explains that he expected to come home and be greeted by Sherri and his kids, because, it was a very lively household, so he expected them to kind of come rushing when he would come in the door, but there was just no one there. It was silent inside the house. So he looks around outside in the backyard, doesn't see anything. So he says that he immediately just assumed that they went out for a walk somewhere altogether. So Keith actually uses the Find My iPhone feature to locate Sherri's phone. And the app tells him that her phone is near their mailbox, which is actually about a mile down the road. So they live in sort of like a rural area, and their mailbox is kind of a walk from the house. So when he sees her phone is around the mailbox, he just assumes that Sherri took the kids for a walk down the street to get the mail. So he gets in his car and drives to the mailbox, but doesn't find them. He calls his mother and he calls his children's daycare, but he actually finds out that the kids are still at daycare and Sherri never showed up to pick them up. So he begins to really worry, and he's searching around the area of the mailbox where the app is telling him her phone is, and what he finds is disturbing. So he eventually finds Sherri's iPhone and a pair of her earbuds, and they're kind of off like on the side of the road, a couple of feet off the road, and tangled within the cord of the headphones is some of her blonde hair. And this is along Sunrise Drive, which is about a mile from their house. So again, the app was accurate. It was about a mile near the mailboxes, maybe not that like next to them, but on a kind of a rural road, sort of in that general area. And the phone was reportedly playing the couple's wedding song on repeat, but there was no sign of Sherri. It was just her phone, her headphones, and her hair, like strands of her hair. So Keith immediately calls 911, and soon a large-scale search effort gets underway. Keith takes to the media. He makes emotional pleas for his wife's return. Friends, family, and strangers rally in support. And Sherri's story really went viral. It was just, this beautiful blonde mother kidnapped in broad daylight. Remember, this is like around 11 a.m. when she was last seen. So it seems that she was sort of just abducted and disappeared in the middle of the day. So I'm actually going to play the 911 call for you. I'll share my screen. There's just a little bit of a video, I guess, slideshow that goes along with it. So I'm just going to set that up. The phone call is about 5 minutes long. So I'm going to play the full 5 minutes so you can hear what Keith reported to the police right away.
911, what is your emergency? CHP transfer. Keith is on the line. Hello, can I help you?
Hello? Yeah, so I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from, daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit, the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone, at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service.
Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again. And I found her phone, and it's got, hair ripped out of it, in the headphones. So I'm, totally freaking out, thinking, somebody, grabbed her.
Okay, what's your address?
Reading.
What's your last name?
Yes. Papini, P-A-P-I-N-I.
And your first name?
Keith.
K-E-I-T-H?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go pick up your children?
No, I'm going to call my mom and have her do it.
Okay. What's your wife's name?
I'm going to, knock on every door. Sherri. S-H-E-R-R-I.
And same last name?
Yes.
She white, female?
Yes.
What's her date of birth?
It is June 11th, 1982.
Is her vehicle there? Does she not have a vehicle?
She has a vehicle at the house.
Okay, the vehicle is at the house?
She's running.
How? Okay.
Yes, I'm in it right now driving, and I took a picture of her phone on the ground before I picked it up.
Okay, how tall is she?
5'3", 5'4".
How much does she weigh?
100 pounds.
Eye color?
Like a bluish blue.
Okay, hair color?
Blonde.
Do you know what she was wearing? Is there something she always wears?
I'm assuming she went running, so
okay,
probably wearing athletic type clothes.
Okay, there's not an outfit she always wears or anything like that. Does she run with a dog or by herself?
By herself.
Okay. What time were the kids?
She just started running again, and we live in a.
When's the last time?
Superman
When's the last time you heard from her?
She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home for lunch.
What time was that?
A bunch of give me 1 second. She sent me a text at 10:47 asking me if I was coming home from lunch from work. And I said, sorry, long day. And that was the last. Never spoke to her on the phone, never any other contact.
Okay, and what time are the kids supposed to be picked up?
Way before 5:30. She usually goes at 4:45.
Okay.
4:30, 4:45.
Okay, are you headed back to the house, or where are you at right now?
I'm at the end of the driveway where I'm at the Old Oregon Trail and Sunrise where they meet, because that's right where I found her phone on the ground. You're telling me that something happened to her is the way I'm looking at it. There's then there was hair in the headphones. It got ripped off of the gravel.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to keep me calm, but obviously.
Yeah. What kind of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a black Kia Optima. Oh my God.
Okay.
And we live down kind of a sketchy street, so I definitely, I don't know if I'm allowed to knock on everybody's door, but I will if I'm allowed to do that.
Well, let's just have the officers contact you so they can start, processing everything, figure out what's going on, okay? And I understand you're freaking out a little bit. We want to make sure we get your kids. Make sure they're okay.
Yeah, I'm going to call my mom and have her.
Yeah, they've been stuck at your phone number.
Yes. Do you want me to wait right here for somebody?
If you want to head back to your residence so they can contact you there, and in case she does return.
Okay.
Okay. We'll have them contact you at your residence. Call us back if anything changes, all right?
All right, so they're going to call the number you just took down, the 355?
They'll probably call you when they're on their way, and they're going to come out in person.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, that's the full 911 call, pretty much him just describing what I had already kind of laid out. But did you have any initial thoughts from that call at all, Katie?
To me, it sounds like the husband seems genuine, worried, doesn't seem like it's a fake call or anything. So, yeah, so far, I would just think that, yeah, he thinks his wife is missing, found the evidence of her hair being pulled out probably, and he's genuinely concerned about her. So, yeah, not really too much else going on, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think on the comments of this, because this was on YouTube, this video, the comments. I mean, we always talk about this, but people say, oh, he doesn't sound frantic enough, or whatever. People saying like he seems like a little bit more calmer than you might expect. But I think when I first listened to it, very, very genuine, it's clearly that he's like stressed and freaking out, but he's not like hysterical or something like that. So,
yeah, it's not like he found like
just pretty...
blood or something like that, where it would be like she's actually hurt somewhere. It's just like, it seems like maybe something happened, but doesn't know for sure. So I feel like that's probably why he's not like losing it really, because you see a pile of blood, that's like a different story.
Yeah, and obviously suspicious enough where her phone is just kind of placed on the side of the road, or it's just laying at the side of the road. So obviously suspicious enough where he called 911, but nothing that would lead him to think, oh, she's dead or something like that. It's just like this very sort of weird situation that's happening. So yeah, Sherri was just gone. So the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, the California Highway Patrol, again, this is happening in Redding, California, or near Redding, California. So all of those parties were involved, the local sheriff, the FBI, and Highway Patrol. So tips poured in from all across the country. There was a $50,000 reward that was offered. And this case was actually pretty high profile back in 2016 when it first happened. And there were rumors all over the place as the media attention grew. There were rumors of sex trafficking. Internet sleuths were on the case and theorized everything from cartel kidnappings to serial killers. And there was one tip that was called in early on. There was a woman who called in to say that she saw someone who matched Sherri's description at a local gas station. When this woman approached who she thought was Sherri, she said that she was kind of evasive and just kind of acting a little bit weird. The police didn't believe that this person was actually Sherri, and they kind of looked into it, but that tip went nowhere. And there were no solid leads, despite initially receiving close to 400 tips from the public. I think eventually it was something like 600 tips by the end of it. So just a lot of people who were trying to call in tips and help the investigation, but just nothing led anywhere. So the police did follow standard procedure in a case like this, and they had to go about eliminating Keith as a potential suspect. As you know, a lot of cases like this, a lot of murders or missing people investigations, it ends up being somebody that they know who did it, or the spouse. So that's probably something that initially kind of was on their minds. And so, you know, he was the one who found the phone. He calls 911. He's all over the news, media, pleading for Sherri's return. And we've seen other cases where the husband does all of these same things and ends up being the one responsible. However, the police didn't find any evidence against Keith, and he did consent to do a polygraph test, which he passed. So one officer interviewed by ABC's 2020. So I did watch a 2020 episode on this case. And I think this one was a couple of years old. I don't know exactly the year, but anyway, he says that initially there were suspicions that the iPhone that was found on the side of the road could have been placed there by someone, either Keith or just kind of planted there. Because it was just, the phone was just there, the headphones were placed right on top of it. Like, it just seemed like a little bit like it could have been somebody just had thrown them there. It wasn't like in the woods or like in the ditch. It was just on the side of the road, kind of like as if someone had placed it there. And yeah, so the family sets up a GoFundMe page to help raise funds to help find Sherri. There's even one anonymous person who actually offers a ransom in exchange for Sherri's safe return. So they put up money and say, if you have Sherri, here's $50K or whatever, please just bring her back. And when 2020 is interviewing Keith in this episode, he's saying he still has no idea who that person was. It was just an anonymous person. There was also this like professional hostage negotiator or something. I don't have too much information on it, but it is brought up in the ABC 2020 case where this professional hostage negotiator is brought into the case and starts like working on it and works with this anonymous person for this ransom. And then eventually the ransom is just canceled. It's not really a ransom anymore, but they just use that money towards a reward for finding Sherri, or for tips for finding Sherri. So it was a pretty big deal. Like I said, back in 2016, it was all over the news. And so a few weeks go by, and now we're at November 24th of 2016, which is actually Thanksgiving Day. And it's very early in the morning of November 24th when Keith says that his cell phone rang, but he was actually like shaving at the time, so he didn't pick it up quick enough. And so he doesn't get to answer it, but then his landline rings, and this is the call that he had been waiting for over 3 weeks. When he answers it, he can hear his wife screaming in the background. She's screaming his name, and as it turns out, Sherri has been found. So early this morning, police are called because somebody calls the police. The police are called and they find that Sherri has been found. So they immediately interview her. They give a statement to the police about the events that led to her being found. So she says that she has a chain around her waist, she had a bag over her head, and that she had one arm tied to the chain that was around her waist. So she really only had one free arm. She's being transported in a car with her left hand, so the one hand that's tied to the chain around her waist, and the other one is tied to something inside the car that's keeping her restrained so that she can't like jump out of the vehicle. Then the car stops, the tie is cut, and then she's just pushed out of the car. So she now has her one free hand. She moves the bag off her head, runs to the nearby freeway, no idea where she is at all. She eventually flags down a passing motorist who pulls over and calls the police. And so that's where the police get involved. They go, they find her, and then that's when they called Keith to say that she has been found. When she was found, she had lost nearly 15% of her body weight. She's like 87 pounds or something like that. She's emaciated. Her long blonde hair has been chopped off. She has several bruises, rashes, a broken nose, and she even has a brand on her shoulder. So when Sherri tells her account to the police, she says that she was kidnapped at gunpoint during her jog on November 2nd by two Hispanic women. And she says that they held her captive inside a room for all this time. They only gave her a bucket of kitty litter for a toilet. They abused her. They branded her. They played, quote, really annoying Mexican music, end quote. Only fed her, quote, stale bread, beans, tortillas, leftover meat, and apples, end quote. She also claimed that she was told that, quote, she would eventually be sold as a slave to a cop, end quote. Then she says after this few weeks time being held captive, she was eventually dumped on the side of the road by, like I said earlier, by, being tied up and all that stuff and just being pushed out of the car basically. But she didn't really, no explanation as to why they decided on that day to be the one, or to, release her that day, or what the circumstances were leading up to that decision that they made. So just a lot of questions, and just a truly painting this terrifying picture of just this innocent woman being held captive for no reason at all. So the public is stunned at this development. She survived, but her story was terrifying. It's really the stuff that nightmares are made out of. Like, you can't really think of a more nightmarish scenario than just being grabbed on the side of the road while you're jogging and just being taken and held captive like this. So that Sherri
that's
was
terrifying.
Okay.
I'm like super like curious about why they would do all that, go through all that, and then let her go. I'm glad they did, but I like wonder why they would just like, especially like in her hometown. It's like, okay, we're done with you, so see ya. I don't know. Like why?
Yeah.
If they were gonna sell her, like if they were
she was,
in like the sex trade or whatever, like that person didn't work out, why wouldn't they just give her to somebody else? Like I'm not like saying like, oh, what they did was stupid, they shouldn't have let her go, but I'm just like, it doesn't make sense to me why they would do all that and then let her go willingly. So it's strange.
Yeah, and one detail I guess I forgot to mention was where she was found was actually like 150 miles away from where she was taken. So she wasn't dropped off like in the same town.
Oh, okay.
It was 150 miles away. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that detail, but yeah, so just kind of like, so that was like the story she gave originally to the investigators, and just a lot of questions, like, yeah, like you were kind of saying, why do all this and then just randomly decide, okay, we'll let you go, and there was no real like explanation, or it's like, if they were that easy to just let her go, why would they even take her in the first place? All this kind of stuff. So super, super weird. So now that she's found and alive, and so like it's not a missing persons investigation anymore, it's not even a homicide investigation anymore or at all, it's just trying to find these people who kidnapped her. And so she provided details about these Hispanic women that she says took her, and there's even like a professional sketch artist that comes in and does sketches of this. And so that's really where the investigation goes to. It's like any tips that would lead to investigators to who these people were or anyone associated with these people, and any answers at all. So as investigators, they dig a bit deeper into this story, and things do begin to unravel, and it's kind of turns into a very different sort of investigation than what they thought that they were going to do. So I'm actually going to read an excerpt from a police affidavit that exists, and I'm going to read that verbatim so I can make sure I get this 100%. So yeah, like I said, the investigation kind of takes this turn into finding out who these people are, but there's a lot of details that investigators find early on that are perplexing and just kind of lead them to want to dig a little bit deeper. So they do an analysis of Sherri Papini's cell phone, and it found 2 phone numbers that were stored under women's names that actually belonged to men. So there's man 1 and man 2. So in a text conversation between man 1 and Papini on November 1st, 2016, so the day before she disappeared, the two discussed meeting in Redding, California. Additionally, travel records show man 1 traveled to San Francisco on October 28th, 2016, and flew back to Michigan on November 2nd, 2016, the day of Papini's disappearance. Investigators traveled out of state to interview man 1 and look for Papini. So this is, I guess, during when she was missing. This is when they kind of looked at her cell phone contacts, is before she was actually found, but while she was still missing. And so they go out of state to find this man and Sherri. They don't find Sherri, and man 1 tells investigators that Papini and him met in approximately 2011 when Papini was out of town for work. The two spent the weekend together and continued to exchange flirtatious text messages throughout the year. So in 2011, Sherri she's married. She got married in 2009 to Keith. So she's 2 years into her marriage, and so she had an affair with this man back in 2011, and they spent years kind of exchanging text messages. So although they had planned to meet during man 1's trip to California, he returned home without seeing her. So the fact that he returned back to Michigan on the same day that she disappeared just ended up being a coincidence. And he didn't really have anything to do with this investigation or with this case. So that kind of a lead went nowhere, but it kind of did shed a little bit more light into Sherri's, behavior, the fact that she was having an affair with this man at that time. And investigators also interviewed man number 2, who was the other person who was stored under a false name in her contacts. So he describes meeting Papini around 2001 at a Friday Night Live youth program and dating her for several years. Man 2 described Papini as an attention-hungry person who told stories to try to get people's attention. Man 2 stated that Papini fabricated stories of being the victim of abuse from her family, her father, and then man 2 after the couple broke up. So that was the information that he gives investigators, which obviously piques their interest and kind of causes them to dig a little bit deeper into Sherri's earlier life. So before she was married and all of that sort of stuff. And there was a history where she had ran away from home, I think, when she was a teenager. And then she had accused her mother or her father of being abusive to her. And so this was something that she had a history of doing, was just kind of this falsifying all of these stories and things like that. So this information that investigators get is definitely interesting, but it's not really evidence of anything, that was before she was found. So it was still
Does her husband know?
kind of a matter of, where is Sherri?
Does her husband know about the affair? Do we know if he knows?
I don't.
At this point?
I don't believe he
No.
knew.
Oh.
At this point, no.
I was going to say, he set the whole thing up. He was pissed. No, but maybe, yeah. He didn't know. Okay.
Yeah. Eventually he knows, but, and like a lot of stuff in police investigations are obviously, like we know, kept close to the vest. So they don't tell everything, and they're probably not telling him or like the family, all of this stuff, as they're kind of digging deeper into all of this stuff. So, and almost immediately, so once Sherri is eventually found, this is after they've already sort of interviewed these two men in her cell phone and all that stuff, law enforcement do find inconsistencies in Sherri's story. So the branding on her shoulder appeared to be, quote, too clean, end quote, almost as if it was done intentionally with some type of care. Her descriptions of her abductors were vague and they changed over time, and she couldn't tell investigators exactly where she was held or how she got there. But the turning point actually came in this case when they looked at some DNA evidence. So there was a mixture of male and female DNA that was found on Sherri's clothing. And I believe obviously they took, DNA samples from her clothing after she was found. And, they found the male DNA. It did not belong to her husband, but it was male and female. She never mentioned anything about a male abducting her, right? She said it was two Hispanic women. So they were trying to find out who the source of this male DNA was. And I think the thought initially was like, well, these women, like maybe if they gave the clothing to Sherri while she was held captive, then, they could have had male acquaintances, or there was male DNA on the clothes when these women had given it to Sherri. So that was also a possibility too. But so they just really wanted to find out who the source of this DNA was. But still, there were no arrests made. The case lingered in limbo for years. So after she's found in November 2020 or 2016, the police are doing sort of an undercover investigation or a behind the scenes investigation, first about finding who these women were, but there was a lot more stuff happening. They were interviewing other people. They were looking at other leads and stuff. So for years, it was just a cold case. Like these kidnappers were just on the loose, and no one knew who they were, where they were, or anything like that.
I find it interesting that it's two women, because like that, I find that you don't really hear about women doing these kinds of things. Especially, it always I don't know, sort of makes it worse for me when it's like a woman sex trafficking another woman, because it's just like, women, they're supposed to look out for each other. Don't do that kind of shit to each other. So, yeah, I find it interesting that it's women abducting a woman for sex trafficking. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's and so obviously then it kind of paints a picture where you start to think, okay, like these women are obviously, they're not working alone, right? There could be, they're working at the request or the behest of like this man who's at the head of it, right? Who's like ordering them to do stuff, and they're victims themselves, all this sort of stuff, right? So it kind of leads you to this idea that there could be like this huge organized thing, and there could be multiple people who were involved in this disappearance. So yeah, like I said, for years, the investigators are really just kind of working behind the scenes, gathering evidence. And so they run this male DNA through CODIS, which is the FBI's DNA database, and they actually get a hit in 2020. So 4 years after she's found, they finally get a hit on this DNA that was found on her clothes. And it wasn't tied to a criminal, but it was actually tied to a man in Michigan whose DNA had been collected during an unrelated investigation. And I believe this is a different man than man number one who was in her phone, because it said he was from Michigan and he traveled back to Michigan the day she disappeared. But this man for the DNA, I believe it's not the same person, but this man turns out to be a relative of James Reyes, which is Sherri's ex-boyfriend who lives in Costa Mesa, California. So the next step in this investigation for the police or the FBI is they need to track down James Reyes, and they need to interview him because if a relative of his DNA is on Sherri's clothes. So I guess they run it through like, the family data, or it's through the database, but it can tie to like family members of people, right? So
Wait.
not saying that the DNA was...
So it's her ex-boyfriend's relative? Is that what you're saying? Or wait, her ex-boyfriend's relative is a relative of this guy?
Yeah, so the DNA, the hit that they got for the DNA was it was a relative of Sherri's ex-boyfriend, James.
Oh.
So nothing to do with that man number one in her phone who was in Michigan. It just happened to be this relative was also in Michigan, even though her ex-boyfriend lived in California. But and I guess the relative of her ex-boyfriend had his DNA collected through some other not connected case, and so his DNA was in the database.
Oh, what a coincidence!
So like James Reyes, her ex.
That's like unlucky.
So her ex-boyfriend's DNA. Yeah, like her DNA or her ex's DNA wasn't in the database, but his relative's DNA was, which was a hit on this. So that's how they do it, like through family tracing, right? Like they do that in other cases too, where it's like, we know that it was like the DNA that gets a hit. It's not necessarily the person who was involved, but they know that it's a family member of someone who's involved or whatever, right? So anyway, as it turns out, this DNA matches this relative of Sherri's ex-boyfriend, James Reyes. So he is, of course, becoming more of a suspect or someone who they really need to interview and talk to. So the FBI agents actually track down this man, James Reyes. Like I said, he lives in Costa Mesa, California, and they interview him in August of 2020. And what he tells them actually blows the whole case wide open and just shocks everyone. And it tells a very different story than what everyone had led or believed up to that point. So Sherri actually hadn't been kidnapped at all. She had ran away voluntarily. So this is what he says. So that she had run away voluntarily. And it was actually him, James Reyes, that picked her up in Redding on November 2nd, 2016, the very day she disappeared. But it wasn't a spontaneous escape. Investigators found out that since December of 2015, so, 11 months before she went missing, Sherri and James had been communicating via burner phones to avoid detection. And they weren't just random texts, they were carefully orchestrated plans. She tells him that she wanted to escape what she described as an abusive marriage, a claim that had no supporting evidence, and they arranged a rendezvous point. So James Reyes admits that he drove up from Costa Mesa and picked Sherri up that morning, just minutes after she left her at the house for a jog. From there, they drove back to his apartment where she remained for 3 weeks. She was never restrained, she was never drugged, and she was never abused. She starved herself. She asked James to brand her with a crafting tool that he bought at Hobby Lobby, and even physically harmed herself to make it appear as though she had been beaten. So he says that she would like slam herself against things in his bathroom to give herself these bruises and these bumps and all of this sort of stuff to appear that she was being beaten.
Why? Was he was he a part of why? Did he know that this was her plan all along, or was he just like, what the fuck is she doing in there? Or was she like, yeah, I'm going to make it look like you beat the shit out of me? Like, this is weird.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I will get into that a little bit more. Actually, the next part here will probably tell you a little bit more. So apparently he says that, so she was there for 3 weeks. When she decided to return home, James said that she told him she missed her children and asked him to drive her back up north, and drop her off along a remote road where she staged her own dramatic rescue. So when she's found on the side of the road in this disheveled state with her hair cut short and all these bruises.
If I was him and saw the state of her, he's dropping her off, I'd be like, oh, this is not going to go well for me if someone finds out I was a part of this. I mean, look at her. She's like starved, no hair, beat up, and she was with you the whole time. So, I mean,
yeah,
that's weird. I feel like, I don't know, he's lying. It seems more likely that he's lying about it. Like, why would she do that to herself? I don't know. That's just weird.
Yeah, it's just very weird. So I'm going to actually read this next part is from the affidavit again. It's directly from there. So I'll just read it verbatim from page 2 of the affidavit. So He's referred to as ex-boyfriend. So this James Reyes is ex-boyfriend. So ex-boyfriend told investigators that Papini stayed with him at his house during the dates of her disappearance, and that it was Papini who reached out to him and asked him to come pick her up in Reading. DNA evidence recovered from Papini's clothing she was wearing when she returned matched ex-boyfriend's DNA. Phone records show that Papini and ex-boyfriend were talking to one another as early as December 2015. Ex-boyfriend told investigators that he and Papini used prepaid phones to talk to one another. This was corroborated through evidence of 2 prepaid cellular phones that were tied to the ex-boyfriend and would communicate with each other, one for Papini's location and the other from ex-boyfriend's location. Historical cell site analysis and toll records of the prepaid phones indicated that ex-boyfriend traveled to Reading on or about the date of Papini's disappearance. Papini and ex-boyfriend exchanged text messages the morning Papini disappeared. They met together around the location where Papini was last seen, and Papini and ex-boyfriend traveled to Southern California together. Ex-boyfriend's cousin, referred to as cousin in the rest of this, told investigators that cousins saw Papini at ex-boyfriend's apartment on 2 different occasions. Both times she was unrestrained. Ex-boyfriend also told investigators that approximately 3 weeks later, he had a friend rent a car for him, and then ex-boyfriend drove Papini back to Northern California, which was corroborated by car rental records and the odometer reading on the rental car. So that's what happened. So obviously he had the foresight to say, well, it's like, I can't rent a car. I don't want my name attached to this. So had, someone else rent the car for him. And I think it was like a 7-hour drive between Costa Mesa and Reading. So she apparently hid in the back seat for 7 hours while he drove her back to, not even Reading, I guess, back to where she was found, which was 150 miles away from Reading itself. But yeah, and then just dropped her off. But James assumes, so he says that Sherri sort of made it seem like she wanted to rekindle a relationship with him, and she wanted to escape her husband who was abusive. She alleged that he was abusive. So he says that when Sherri came to stay with him, he assumed that they were going to resume their romantic relationship. However, it was completely platonic, and he realizes that he had mostly been used by Sherri and had become an accomplice in her hoax. And he says that he had no TV, so he didn't know anything about the national media coverage that the case was receiving. So he didn't hear anything about the fact that she was considered a missing person or any of the stuff about the investigation. If he looked at the news at all, he would have known that. So he just says that she sort of framed, because they were talking to each other since December 2015, right? So for 11 months, she sort of framed it as I need to get away from him. And she kind of probably maybe manipulated him and said, I want to rekindle things with you. So can you come pick me up and get me out of this horrible situation? And then once she was there at his house, she was doing all this stuff, cutting her hair and putting her marks and bruises on her, and then said 3 weeks later, "Oh, I miss my kids. Can you drive me back to this place?" And so he did that.
This was her plan all along to make it look like she was kidnapped. I was thinking oh, maybe that was her plan, was to get away, and then she backed out and decided she didn't want that, and so she made up this whole hoax to make it look like she was being held captive. But it seems like from the get-go, that's what she was kind of doing. I don't understand what the point was.
Yeah, it seems it's clear to me, I think that it was a very kind of well-orchestrated thing by Sherri. It wasn't just her plans changed midway through or anything like that. Because, she planted her phone on the side of the road. That's a very clear, deliberate thing. She could have just taken her phone with her. I guess maybe they didn't want it to be traced or tracked, I guess. But I don't know. And I think the presence of a burner phone, I guess it makes sense if he's thinking well, we need to use a burner phone because if she's she doesn't want him to read her text. If he really is this abusive, horrible man, I don't want him, or she doesn't want him reading her texts and seeing that she's chatting with the other guy and planning to get away. So maybe that makes sense. But to me, if someone was communicating through a burner phone, I would think more this is some more nefarious stuff than just this. Because I don't know, I feel that would be in my head of well, because obviously having an affair with someone isn't a crime. You can't get in jail for that, right? So I would think there's more some criminal activity that's happening here. I don't know. That would just be my thought, but just very weird. So yeah, that was his kind of side of the story, that like he was sort of just manipulated by her, and she made it seem like they were just gonna rekindle their relationship. She was gonna run away with him, but then just started acting weird and doing all this stuff to her, and then said, yeah, drive me back to this place and I'm gonna stage as if I've just been found. And also it was just very like, it just seemed like a very like deliberate thing. Like she was trying to make it, I felt like she was sort of trying to make it like, she painted this picture of like, oh, it was these two Hispanic women, and, you know, they listened to all this Mexican music and they fed me all this Mexican food. Like it just seemed very like also kind of like racist a little bit too. Like that was who she was kind of trying to point it to, because maybe she thought like that would get more media attention, or that like, I don't know, maybe just more believable. I don't know. It was very odd. It's just interesting choice of
it is. It's yeah.
People to sort of pin this on.
Yeah, that is strange to say it was two Mexican women. Like I don't know. That seems random. And yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And also, why like women?
I know that's the weird part. Yeah, yeah, weird.
Because like to me, like because you were kind of saying when I was like explaining it, like you're like, well, the fact that it's two women is just so kind of shocking that like two women would do. Like to me, it's like if you want to make it more believable, it would be like that it was a man. Because how many times would it be two women kidnapping another woman? Like usually there would be a man involved in there. So I mean, it's a generalization. I don't want to say that, I guess.
But that's how it always is. Like you like I was saying, you never hear of women kidnapping. I mean, maybe you'd hear it, but not very often. Women kidnapping other women.
Sometimes it would be like a man and a woman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But usually there's always a man involved in there somewhere, never just two women doing it.
Yeah. It's weird.
And yes, and she said that they were going to sell me as a slave to a cop. It's just elaborate. That's why it seems like it's very like was deliberate, because it was a very elaborate story. So obviously she had these details sort of worked out.
And like, yeah, like when you were saying when her ex or somebody was saying that she loved to make stories up so to get attention, like this seems like just dedication to the max for a made up story to get attention. Like starving herself and cutting her hair and making it look like she was beat up. Like that's crazy attention seeking. Like, I don't know. Like, why go to that extreme? I don't know what was her point? Just to have sympathy? Like some excitement in her life? Like why do that to your kids? For sure. Like their kids think their mom's missing. Like that's sad.
Yeah. And also, it's like, what was her long-term plan? Like, obviously, if you think you're staging this thing to be this kidnapping, and you know that there's this manhunt out there for you, what's your long-term plan? I mean, maybe that's when she realized, like, oh shit, I have to like go back and stage this, make this. So maybe she didn't have the whole story planned out from the beginning, but like, she had 3 weeks to think about what it would be.
Maybe she didn't know it was going to be like this
but then
huge
she realized,
blow-up thing. Like, she didn't know the FBI were going to get involved. Like, you think maybe she just thought it would be a little bit smaller than it actually turned out to be. But, I mean, she's a missing blonde woman in America, so you have to realize it's going to blow up.
Yeah, it's always those cases, right, that blow up. So, yeah, it's so, anyway, just, and like, yeah, like I said, there was a history of it where her parents would say that she would like fabricate story. Her ex-boyfriend would say she would fabricate stuff and would run away from home and like tell everyone that her parents were abusive or her father was abusive and all of this stuff. So this is, I guess, probably, like you said, a very extreme version, but it's not anything that she hadn't done. There was like little inklings of it in her earlier life too. So yeah. So after years of mounting evidence, so like I said, since 2016, the police are just doing this sort of background investigation, whereas I feel like the general public was thinking of it as like this unsolved kidnapping case where are these two Hispanic women? Like, where are they? They need to be found or whatever. But internally, the FBI were like conducting a very different sort of investigation. And so actually, after years of mounting evidence, Sherri Papini is arrested on March 3rd of 2022, and she's charged with making false statements to federal agents and also mail fraud. And yes, mail fraud is one of them, because during those years, she actually had collected over $30,000 in victim compensation funds, claiming that she was a kidnapping survivor. So mail fraud was one of the charges as a result of that. And in court documents, prosecutors detailed a web of lies, including text messages that she sent to James Reyes before her disappearance, in which she described her marriage as abusive, which is a claim that, again, had no supporting evidence. Her phone records, her travel history, and even Reyes's purchase records corroborated everything that Reyes said. So in a 2024 interview with People magazine, her husband, Keith, I guess ex-husband now, reveals that he kicked Sherri out of the house upon learning that the whole thing was a hoax. And although he let her return after one day, she said it wasn't the same between them. She'd say, I love you. I didn't do anything. I told you they're messing with us. They're trying to pit us against each other and all that sort of stuff. So just the same lies and manipulation that she would always do.
Did she ever confess to say that she really was kidnapped, or did she finally give it up and say she did the whole thing herself?
Yeah, so I will get into that. So after being arrested, she was released on a $120,000 bail under the conditions that she could only travel within a certain part of California. She had to surrender her passport and undergo psychiatric treatment. Then in April of 2022, she signed a plea agreement in which she pled guilty to counts of lying to a federal officer and mail fraud, and agreed to pay more than $300,000 of restitution to various government entities. So she did ultimately plead guilty and had a whole statement in court saying what she had done and that it all was just a hoax. So, and then in September of 2022, Sherri was officially sentenced to 18 months in prison and spent less than a year in jail before being transferred to a residential reentry facility in Sacramento County. And then fast forward in October 2023, she was released from a halfway house where she had been under community confinement. She's currently on supervised release until 2026 and still owes more than $300,000 in restitution. Her husband, Keith, has since filed for divorce and custody of their children in April of 2022, calling the situation, quote, a betrayal beyond comprehension, end quote. The community, once united in their support, was left with, this just overall feeling of why, this was just crazy to put everyone through this. So they were confused, they were angry. The woman that they rallied around and donated to and searched for had been lying the entire time. And so the Sherri Papini case is now kind of a textbook example of a modern hoax, one fueled by media sensationalism, social media sharing, and just kind of this image of the perfect victim, kind of like we were saying before, this blonde white girl in America goes missing. So that's why the case blew up, of course. And then to find out it was all sort of just this hoax it's just crazy. And it outlines how rare false reports actually are. They are so rare, but also the real damage that they do cause, not just to the justice system, but to actual victims whose credibility may now be called into question. So now that this is in someone's mind, you always have to think, is there going to be copycat people who are doing similar things? So now every case that is, now even if a case is completely 100% legitimate, it's going to have to sort of be kind of put through this lens of having to rule that out as a possibility because of this case, especially if there's any kind of circumstances that are similar maybe. So it's always going to kind of maybe be in people's minds now. And there was also this thing too of this is unrelated to this case, but that documentary, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's on Netflix about that woman who says that she was kidnapped,
American Nightmare or something.
And the couple. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And the couple, and then everyone thought she was lying about it. I don't know the dates of this and stuff. So maybe, was it because of maybe it was before this case, so it wasn't
I think
because of this case.
Yeah, I can't remember when it was, but yeah, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is this actually real? And it actually was.
Yeah. And now, but now that this, the Sherri Papini case, now it's you have a case on record where somebody went to this horrible extreme of lying to this degree, and now real victims who, say someone for example, goes missing under the same sort of circumstances, they're out jogging, their phone's found, whatever. It's it's likely it's not going to be a hoax, but you always have that in the back of your mind of it just kind of taints and I don't know, kind of harms real victims who actually do have real stories, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm what she didn't gain anything from this. It's not like she's oh, I got what I wanted, except I guess she wanted attention and she got a shitload. How embarrassing. If it comes out that, I made it all up, and they got the FBI and the whole country involved, I'd be so embarrassed.
Yeah, I know. It's so embarrassing. I just yeah, that's the kind of thing I was thinking of when I was researching this, and just even now it's I don't understand why. I don't get it. Yes, if there's evidence that she likes attention or what's that Munchausen syndrome, where you're harming yourself to get attention from people. But it was sort of a case of I don't know. It's you have to know when you fake your own disappearance, it's not going to end well. So I don't know. It's just very bizarre. It's like this woman had this like uncontrollable need to like get attention or to be the victim of something or just, I don't know.
I think she just
And
wanted
again,
attention.
there's no evidence.
And I think that but like you were saying, they didn't have a TV, so maybe she didn't know how big it was, but it just seems to me like it just got out of hand and it got way too big that she just couldn't like keep it up anymore. But if she didn't know that, I don't know. It's weird. She got way too much, bit off more than she could chew for sure.
I think maybe she was ultimately thinking like, okay, even if it's been 3 weeks and I guess she doesn't know maybe the extent or how big it's gotten, but like she's thinking, okay, at least if I like come back or I'm found, then it'll just turn into this investigation. But like if I just provide all this fake description of these people, it's never going to lead to anything. So she's like, in her mind, she's like, well, at the very least, it's going to be just like an unsolved case where people are going to just be looking for these people that don't exist.
Yeah, she definitely thought she was smarter than them.
True, because
like she thought she was smarter than them because she could get away with this, right? So didn't think that they'd be able to figure it out.
Yeah,
embarrassing.
But also, you have to think of the possibility that. Yeah. Also, you have to think of the possibility too of like the fact that they could also falsely arrest someone thinking it's them. You know what I mean? Like if they're looking for these people who match this description.
Yeah, I wonder if they did arrest somebody, like if really she would have been come forward and be like, no, that's not them, or if she would have just went with it.
Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, yeah, and obviously I don't think she assumed that this was, and ultimately, like, I mean, yes, she did go to jail. She ended up spending less than a year. She pays all this money in restitution, but like, that's very small. I mean, she kind of got off scot-free.
Well,
in a way. She went to jail,
she
but
probably
like, now
lost
she's out
custody of her kids, right? So that's like a huge thing, which she probably wasn't expecting to happen.
Yeah.
If the reason why she came back was because she missed her kids, I mean, this is a really shitty outcome for her. But I mean, she did it to herself, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, and like also, so Hulu released a documentary about this case back in 2024, and it's called Perfect Wife: The Mysterious Disappearance of Sherri Papini, in which her ex-husband Keith provides his side of the story. And then I saw a news article saying that Sherri has condemned the documentary, saying that Keith is, quote, reopening old wounds, end quote, by participating in it. However, she is in the process of participating in one of her own, from her perspective, with Investigation Discovery. So she's going to be...
Oh my God.
I guess, and she's never really talked publicly about the case since it happened or since it all came out. It's like she's never done interviews or anything like that. So this, I guess, documentary that's coming out sometime this year by Investigation Discovery is going to be like her first, and it's going to be marketed as like she speaks out for the first time.
What is she going to say to defend herself that people are going to be like on her side about? She's going to be like, oh my God, like, stop.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it'll be in the news when it comes out, and I'm sure people will be watching it. It's kind of one of those things, right? Like she has no credibility at all. So it's like, why now? Like, who cares what she has to say? Like, this is what she's done. The evidence is there as to what she's done, right? And also like the fact she's saying that he's reopening old wounds by doing it. It's like the wounds that you created, that you caused. He's doing a documentary about how horrible you were. Like, it's not his documentary. It's like he just participated in it, like probably interviewed in it, but you're the one who caused this. So like, I don't really get I don't know. Just very weird, but she's, probably a narcissist or, whatever. Like, yes, she admitted that she did it because it was like a plea deal, because she probably realized she was going to get more time if she didn't. So, I mean, she admitted to doing it, but I'm sure she's probably going to spin it. And I don't know, obviously, because it's not out yet, but like, I'm sure there's going to be some attempt at spinning it somehow or telling tall tales of stuff like that Keith was a horrible person or whatever. But
well, you said she got psychiatric help, so maybe she actually like realized that this was wrong and like she was just seeking attention. Maybe she like admits that and will come out and say that she had a problem.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like somebody like she's gone this far or this long and hasn't I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like irredeemable or unfixable at this point. Like, if someone who could do this, I don't really know if it can be rehabilitated or like actually changed. But
yeah, and it wasn't just like a spur of the moment thing. It was like she had planned this, right? Because she had that burner phone, and she obviously like was thinking about this for a while. So yeah, I feel bad. I jumped to conclusions like, oh, the husband set it up. I mean, he wasn't involved at all.
But I mean, that's like the natural progression of the investigation too, right? Like everyone kind of thinks the husband
Yeah.
was potentially involved, right? Like everyone kind of thinks of that. Um, yeah. So it's just, that's why it's like such a unique story than ones we've ever done before, because we've never really done one that was like, well, we've covered like hoaxes before, like the one we did a couple of weeks ago, Bell Gibson or whatever, like that was a hoax, but like not in the same way. So yeah, there was another article by yahoo.com, that talks about a little bit more about, it says, quote, in Hulu's Perfect Wife, the mysterious disappearance of Sherri Papini, Keith Papini claims that his ex-wife forced their two children, Tyler and Violet, to breathe in rubbing alcohol in order to deliberately make them sick. So this is stuff that he's saying, I guess, in this documentary from like obviously before she went missing, like when they were just still married. He says one day, it says, quote, one day after Sherri was already in prison, as I go and lay my daughter to bed, I push off the bed and I kind of make a little grunt sound like, I was a little bit sore, Keith Papini said in the series, according to People. Violet, she was like, Daddy, are you sick? And she goes, why don't you do mommy's trick? When Keith Papini asked Violet to clarify what she meant, she said his daughter told him, quote, well, you just breathe in this rubbing alcohol, end quote. She goes to the bathroom. She knows right where the rubbing alcohol is, he added. She wads up a thing of toilet paper and just soaks it and then hands it to me to breathe. As to how often Sherri Papini made such a demand of her children, Keith Papini said Violet claimed it happened every single day before her mother took her to the doctor. Find out, Sherri would soak rags of alcohol and put it in a Ziploc bag and tie a string around their neck onto the Ziploc bag so that they could continue to smell the fumes to make them not feel good, he explained. And Sherri Papini appeared to vanish without a trace. Oh yeah, and then it goes into, I was reading from this article, it goes on to talk about it. But so this is stuff I'm assuming he says in this Hulu documentary that I haven't seen. So this is just what the Yahoo article says.
Yeah, this definitely like Munchausen by proxy. So it's like she has like Munchausen and Munchausen by proxy. It's like she's doing both to herself and her kids.
Yeah.
Just attention seeking for sure. Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah. And then maybe she like felt guilty that she was putting her kids through that. So then she's like, well, I'm just going to do something about myself, putting myself through that. It's just a very, very strange. So I'm assuming these are allegations, of course. And so I don't know the validity of that or if that's true, but that's just what he's alleging in this documentary. So very crazy. And then I was also reading, this is like not really related to the case, but apparently like, I don't know if you watched the new season of Survivor, but apparently one of her ex-boyfriends is on the show. Not like anyone who's involved in this case, or like not that ex-boyfriend or anything like that. Just someone who dated her like years ago. Which is just interesting because it's funny because I'm watching the new season of Survivor, so I didn't expect that. But on the bottom of one of the articles I read saying like one of her ex-boyfriends who did an interview about how manipulative she was and talks about like that she would lie about all this stuff, he's now on Survivor. So
I was like, did they say that on Survivor? It's like his description is like one of Sherri Papini's ex-boyfriends. No.
Yeah, no, it didn't come up at all like on the show or anything, but like I think it was People like an article from People magazine said one of her ex-boyfriends is now on the new season of Survivor.
I'm sure he loves being he loves that coming up. He's like, oh my god, like he hates that connection. He says
apparently like he only did interviews because I think he did interviews talking about her obviously before he was on Survivor, but the only reason he did it was because people, or I don't know the timeline, but anyway, he said people would like automatically assume I was somehow involved in this. Because when you say you're an ex-boyfriend of Sherri Papini, and if you know this case, you're like, oh, are you the ex-boyfriend? Like, are you the one who like drove her or whatever? Like, did you know all this stuff? So he kind of just did an interview to be like, no, I have nothing to do with this. I dated her like years before this happened. But I have my own stories of her being a liar and all this stuff, manipulative.
Oh, crazy.
So, just interesting. Yeah. So crazy. Yeah. It's just it's a wild case. And yeah, that's kind of where it stands. So I'm sure this year there's going to be some documentary that comes out that's, I don't know if it's from her perspective, but she's interviewed in it, and I'm sure she'll be telling her side of the story, and we'll see how different it is from Keith's side of the story. But yeah. So I guess, did you have any final thoughts or any questions or anything left you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, it definitely turned out different than I was expecting. I feel I don't know. I feel sad for her kids. Like, I don't know if they ever see her or how they feel about this. But yeah, it's just sad when there's kids involved and you do shitty shit to your kids. Yeah, it's a weird one. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, when you told me right before we started that you didn't know much or anything about this case, because we actually weren't originally going to do this one for this episode, but it was sort of like a kind of a last minute change. But yeah, when you said you didn't know anything, I was like, oh, that actually makes it maybe a little more interesting for you, that you're going to kind of be hearing it as it unravels kind of without knowing much about it. So that was good, I think. But yeah, so wild, crazy case. And I was going to say, we'll update you as we go. I don't know if there's going to be any updates. I mean, the case is kind of closed. Like, we know that she lied, all this stuff. We know what really happened, where she was, and all that stuff. So nothing really new is going to come out except maybe whatever she has to say in this documentary that's going to come out. So maybe we'll do an episode about the documentary if we watch it. It's going to be Investigation Discovery, who usually does pretty good stuff. So I think it'll be at least a good documentary. I'm not like I'm going to believe anything she says, but I'm just interested to see the documentary itself.
I'd be interested to see what she has to say too.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this, but yeah, Keith, is obviously her ex-husband now. They got divorced and custody of the kids, and she was fighting for custody back. I think she has visitation now. I think she's like allowed to have visitation with her kids or something like that. I don't know the super in-depth details of that, but they're divorced for sure. Because why? Of course they are. Why would you stay with someone after something like that? Yeah, so that does it for this week's episode. And we hope you enjoy listening to this case. And hopefully Stephanie's back with us next week for our next episode, for our next case. And you can find us on social media, on all the social media. So Facebook, Crime Family Podcast. We're on Instagram, Crime Family Podcast. You can find us on TikTok, Crime Family Pod, and YouTube, Crime Family Podcast. Just type in Crime Family Podcast on YouTube. You'll find our channel where you can watch the video versions of all of our episodes. You can also watch the video versions on Spotify. So if you are a Spotify listener, you will be able to watch these video versions. I'm looking into getting the video version on Apple Podcasts, because I know a lot of people listen on Apple Podcasts. But it's kind of course, it's Apple, so it's turning out to be a little bit more involved than I expected. So we'll work on that. We'll see. But for now, it's on Spotify or YouTube. So if you find us on YouTube, you'll get the video version. And yeah, thanks so much. And we'll be back next week with a new case. So until next time, take care.
Bye.